Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of Dingers and Stingers, the podcast whose chief concern this week is previewing the AFC West. I'm Dallas, that's Matt, and that's Drew, and this will be our AFC West preview episode. And so we're continuing our division previews. If you've missed any of our previous division previews, we've almost done all of the divisions. This is our second to last division. So go back and check out the archive to watch all of our other division previews. They've been really fun to do. But for today, we are going to tackle the AFC West, represented here on the podcast, by, of course, Drew himself. So we've got the John Lynch jersey in the back, the Broncos hat up front. So we are repping hard for the AFC West on the pod today. So before we crack into, the deep dives into all the teams here, let's talk about the AFC West for a little bit. I just want to know what, is your guys' initial, general, what do they call it? 30,000 foot, view of the AFC West, just generally for you guys.
I mean, it's home. It's home for me. It's the division that I grew up watching, not only because of the Broncos, but when we were kids and the Rams were not in LA, they were in St. Louis, like the Chargers were the Southern California team that would be on TV every week and all that. So, and of course, there's always a lot of Raiders fans around for some reason. But lately it's the Chiefs division. It's been the Chiefs division since Peyton Manning retired, essentially, which that is even a couple of years before Mahomes entered the picture. But they have won the division 9 straight years, I think, if my math is right. And, of course, have a few Super Bowls in that time. So it's been them versus all the others, and there hasn't been too much of a fight, maybe until last year, and we'll see about this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's not much else to say. It's one of the best divisions in football, and I think it's, by competition level, only gotten better. Wins and losses can fluctuate, but as far as just the competitiveness and, playoff representation, I think this is by far one of the best divisions in football. So should be a fun one.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about the division before we get started, we might not talk about this in too much detail. Like this part of it, we'll definitely talk about Pete Carroll coming to the Raiders. But maybe this part of it might not get too much attention, but it was like Pete versus Jim Harbaugh is back, and it's just it's going to be so fun. Whether it's like, they definitely dislike each other. I think maybe Jim Harbaugh dislikes Pete more than Pete dislikes Jim Harbaugh at this point. But I think, watching those two teams go at it, watching those two guys meet again at midfield, it's just going to be so fun. It's going to feel like old times, back in the Seahawks-Niners days. It's going to be really great. It's going to be incentive to, maybe tune in if possible to some of those matchups. So, because as we might hint at later, those matchups still this year might be a little definitely one-sided, perhaps, we might think. But it's a good reason to tune in for the storylines there. But that's one thing I'm looking forward to about this year for this division. It's just that rivalry coming back. I didn't have a new chapter in the Pete Carroll Harbaugh rivalry on my 2025 bingo card, but I'll happily take it for sure. So, okay. So let's get into it. As we always do, before we talk about our previews for this year, we got to talk a little bit about last year. So where we've been with this division in 2024, the final standings were the Kansas City Chiefs won the division, 15 wins, 2 losses. They made it once again all the way to the Super Bowl. No three-peat, though. As we discussed earlier in our NFC East division preview, they lost the Super Bowl to the Eagles. And so they did finish atop the division. Second place last year was the Los Angeles Chargers. They finished 11-6 and lost in the wild card round to the Texans. And then in third place, the Denver Broncos at 10-7, who also made the playoffs and lost in the wild card round to the Bills. And then at the bottom, and I do mean at the very, very bottom, the Raiders with 4 wins and 13 losses. Obviously a tough year for them, but hopefully they can bounce back a little this year, but we'll see. So now that we've, addressed that, let's talk about where we're going and talk about our 2025 offseason recaps and our division predictions for this division this year. So we'll go in finishing order like we always do and start with the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs entered the 2024 season, the defending champions, the 3P solidly in their sights. In the opinions of a lot of people, it was like, if any team has a chance at it, why wouldn't it be this team? And, their record might indicate a dominant season, another dominant season. And if you are someone who, says it's all about the W, it's all, that's the only thing that matters, then it was a dominant season. To be absolutely sure it was. But Kansas City did ride, 10 victories of 7 points or less to their 15-2 record, while their offense and defense both ranked top 10 in EPA per play. There were concerns along the offensive line and an injury-riddled wide receiver group that made a playoff run look as dubious as it ever could for the Chiefs. But still, when it mattered the most, they did step up and look like themselves, and they made it all the way back to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately for them, they ran into a buzzsaw offense in the Eagles, and also that Eagles suffocating defense. So, believe it or not, there are some areas where the Super Bowl runner-up could improve. So let's check in with their offseason and see what moves they made to try to address some of those spaces.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you say, believe it or not, the runner-up can improve. This may be one of the most, improvable Super Bowl teams I've ever seen as far as roster construction goes. And you'll see it here. I mean, just the amount of turnover they had this year, I think, kind of speaks to that. So as far as notable additions go, they brought in cornerback Christian Fulton, solid younger guy, high talent, never really lived up to it, but with the Chiefs, who knows? They brought in Jalen Moore, the offensive tackle. They have kind of had no consistency at their offensive line, for the last 3 years outside of Joe Thuney. Speaking of notable departure. And then they just brought in a bunch of defensive players. Not a ton of big names, not a ton of guys who, are household names, but they've just flooded their roster with defensive players, hoping to probably just find a dime a dozen. They're just hoping one or two of those guys may stick and turn into something. But then as far as the departures go, this is where you start to recognize some of these names. As mentioned, Joe Thuney, he's gone. He's on the Bears. They lost L'Jarius Sneed, but that happened quite a while ago. They end up losing Mike Edwards, linebacker Willie Gay, who I think people don't realize how big of a deal he was for them. And then recently traded Sky Moore over to the 49ers. So a lot of moves, a lot of turnover, and, an interesting roster to be sure.
They did add all those depth pieces on the defense. They're sort of injury guarding themselves a little bit, which you have to respect. I think as a team who has high expectations for themselves, they feel like they have a quarterback who, as long as he's in the mix, who they roll out on defense as far as replacement level players, they can kind of get by, is what they feel. And so far, you would have to believe them because they've not shown you that they can't yet. And so this is going to be an interesting test for that group specifically. But another thing that we like to do for all of these teams is to give an X factor for each team. And sometimes I say it on the episode, sometimes I don't. But there is a rule that we've given our guys here for X factors: no quarterbacks, no coaches. It's not a hard and fast rule. You can say a quarterback or a coach if you want, but I thought it would be a nice challenge. So that's just a caveat going in. So when we name somebody and you're thinking, obviously the most important person on the field is this person, consider that they had those limitations in your mind there. So let's talk about X factors for the Chiefs. We'll start with Drew, and then we'll go to Matt. What you guys got?
Yeah, I mean, for the Chiefs, it's got to be Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. No, I'm just kidding. No, the Chiefs, it's kind of, some teams are so bad that it's challenging to come up with one X factor. And I'm not saying the Chiefs are like untouchably good, but it seems like no matter what the ingredients are on this team, they find success. So I'm not particularly worried, like if one guy doesn't perform well, like in that sense. But I do think that we have not seen the Chiefs offense be as explosive in recent years. That was their hallmark at the beginning of the Mahomes era. And in recent years, it's been their defense that has kept them competitive. So I am interested to see how long that can last. And so for me, I think Xavier Worthy, the second-year wideout from Texas, he's going to be my X factor because a few years ago they traded Tyreek Hill, and ever since they haven't really had that true, consistent number one wide receiver for Patrick Mahomes. And Kelsey has been that target at times, but he's getting up there in years and hasn't really been as productive of a player in recent years. And I think it could just send this offense back to those levels if Mahomes could have that guy when he's wandering around and scrambling and evading pressure and just launches it downfield. It seemed like it was always Tyreek Hill down there. If Xavier Worthy can take that role, because he's lightning fast, which that was Tyreek Hill's trademark as well. He's a very talented player. We saw it in the Super Bowl. He had some big plays in the Super Bowl, mostly in garbage time, but still. And they also have Rashee Rice on this team, who is a very talented player, but he has a potential suspension looming, and we don't really know how that's going to play out. He also has had to miss some practice recently with an injury, so I don't know how much they're going to be able to count on Rice. So it's really going to be up to Xavier Worthy to step up and be that target for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll bounce kind of off of what you said with the whole Kelsey getting up there in age, because I think a lot of what was missed in that offense, when you look at kind of the older Chiefs, super explosive offenses, was, yes, Tyreek Hill making all the special plays. They had Travis Kelce constantly moving the chains, constantly picking up the easy yards. It felt like it was such a back-breaking thing where it was like, okay, are we going to play, 2 high, 3 high, and take away those big plays? If so, Kelsey's going to gash us for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. Or are we going to come up, cover the middle, do all these things, and let Tyreek run behind our safeties as Mahomes, does his magic and just throws it further than we expected? With that being said, I personally believe they've got to find a way to make things easier on Mahomes again. It's the same vibe, but different, flavor, I guess. Because it's like, long story short, I went with Isaiah Pacheco. I think they've got to get their ground game going. Just because, like you said, the number one guy who I think profiles as a number one receiver is Rashee Rice. We don't know what his future is going to be. And, he's going to have the suspension. He's already had injury issues. And to be honest, his play style profiles more like a Michael Thomas, in his time. He's kind of a slot merchant and kind of a slant guy. He does like slants and outs, some button hooks. It's a very simple route tree for Rashee Rice. Not the kind of route tree you would expect for someone to be a number one receiver. So I think they need to get back to their run game. It's the number one way you can take pressure off of Mahomes. And I think we saw, Mahomes is Superman to a line. There is an end to the magic he can produce. And we've seen it a couple times now. And a lot of times when the Chiefs find themselves in trouble, it's them having to rely too heavily on Mahomes to make it happen. So yeah, I think they need to do that. I had it written here. I still think this is crazy. We talked about Kelsey getting older. People don't realize Mahomes is getting up there. Mahomes is closing in on being a 10-year vet. I think he's like a year or two out. And that's crazy to me. I feel like he's still just one of the young guys. He's one of these, up and coming flashy guy. No, dude, he's been here. Like, he got drafted in 2017. Next year, that's going to be like his 10th, 9th, 10th year, whatever. It's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy to me that we're at this point where he's the old guy now. And he's like the old wily vet who's just going to keep making these plays. But with that, you got to find something to put around him, because the offense just keeps getting worse every year. Like, straight up, their offense just keeps getting worse every year, and they're hoping Mahomes holds it together. I don't know how much longer he's going to hold it together like that.
Yeah. And all great points. I think, the thing that I, agree the most with is that, yes, another finding a way to unlock the explosive plays again is, going to be super important. But like we're alluding to here, it's also going to be important for finding a guy who can make it so that Mahomes doesn't have to scramble, where the plays can come out on time. And the things can happen, because we all know that, while Mahomes is one of the best still in the league at the off script stuff, he's really also very good at when the plays need to happen on time. And I'm sure he'd prefer that, especially, at this point, he'd love to, run an offense that happens very on schedule. And so, or at least shift that way starting this year, perhaps. And so, finding that target is going to be, a huge thing for him. So, look, no one will doubt the Chiefs' ability to contend for a title as long as Patrick Mahomes is a quarterback and Andy Reid is the head coach, right? And the Chiefs, they had a draft that's been very well regarded. Something that we don't, talk about in our offseason recaps is like teams' drafts, because that would be, take a long time. And, we kind of talked about the draft when it was happening and stuff. So, but just to mention that, a lot of people really like the Chiefs' drafts this year. So that could play a factor as well. Some young players could start contributing quickly. And so, in a division, in a conference, it's only getting more competitive, though. The kind of dominance that we've seen from the Chiefs may be facing its greatest challenge this season. Of course, that has the asterisk that they will probably for sure win 13 or more games with their eyes closed again this year somehow, as they always do. But from the look of it, it looks to be that the conference and certainly the division is rising to the level of the Chiefs to try to compete with them. And so it's only a matter of time. And maybe this is the year that one of those teams finally gets one over on them. Bills, Ravens, somebody finally gets it over on the Chiefs.
I will just say, I will cut in right before we get to the next one. I don't know that this will make a huge difference in wins, losses, etc. Let it be known, the Chiefs did have a bit of a scandal a few months back, and the NFL had fired multiple top referees who were all caught up in a scandal with the Chiefs, either helping or not rigging, but essentially benefiting the Chiefs. And, we talked a lot about last year, like, oh my gosh, they've got that Swifty black magic going on. Like, they keep winning these games they have no business winning, and they played terribly, and somehow they're like, we might not see as much of that happening anymore. I mean, who's to say, but something to keep an eye on for sure is how the refs are going to be responding this season to being a part of the Chiefs games. I'm sure they don't want to be caught up in anything either, because I don't know, big scandal.
Yeah. And it was like I mentioned at the top, I mentioned 10 wins of seven or less points, is that a sign of something to come? Is that a sign of waning dominance, or is it a sign of this was just one of those years and they happened to come out on top because they're well coached and things like that? So, but it could be a sign of a waning dominance that could be ready to be flipped to the other side this time. Not saying they're going to lose 10 one-score games, but, a few of those might get dropped this year. You never know. But let's talk about a team that's going to try their best to topple the Chiefs this year because, they've shown that they have the ability and the capability to rise to that challenge. And that's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers. So we'll talk about them next. So they came into the 2024 season hot off of one of the most eventful off seasons in recent memory, they hired Jim Harbaugh away from Michigan, making his return to the NFL last year, and they overhauled some key parts of their roster to match the new look coaching staff. So, you saw the offense take a shift from, pass heavy to more run focused. You saw the defense take a shift from, a lot of, larger, bigger names to bigger names in the secondary to bigger names up front to match Jim Harbaugh's ideal play style. And so what the result of that was, they accomplished the year one mission, which was to go from 5-12 in 2023 to a contender right away. That was the mission. It was the expectation, whether fair or not, that Jim Harbaugh coming in, changing things around, would turn them into a contender because of the talent on the roster. So the consequence of such a quick turnaround, though, is expectations of further improvement in year two. And so, these expectations are things that this team carried into the offseason. So let's see how they equip themselves to meet those lofty expectations in this 2025 season and talk about their offseason recap here.
Yeah, I think, we'll just jump into it. Notable additions. They went out, they got Mekhi Becton. He's going to be playing guard for them, can swing out to tackle if need be. They signed Mike Williams, rest in peace, no longer. They also signed Najee Harris, rest in peace to the eye.
I gotta say,
and then they signed
for people who are like not internet speak people, he didn't die.
Oh, all alive. Alive.
Rest in peace in that sense that they will not be playing. Like
Mike Williams, healthy and alive. He retired. He's probably happy. Najee Harris got his eyes blown out by fireworks. They say he'll be back. Rest in peace to them. Good note, though. Good note. And then lastly, they brought in corner Dante Jackson. As far as the departures go, they finally cut ties with Joey Bosa, who went over to the Bills. They let go of Morgan Fox. They let Poona Ford head over to the Rams, and then they let J.K. Dobbins go to division rival Broncos. So definitely notable names. It's Jim Harbaugh's making his impact known for sure.
And so, you talk about those additions, those subtractions. Let's talk about who on the team is going to make the biggest impact. And let's talk X factors for the Chargers and Drew, kick us off.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Chargers, they had a great defense last year. They had one of the best defenses in football. And their offense, I feel less worried about. Even though Rashawn Slater is out for the season, like Matt mentioned, I don't remember if this was off camera or if it was on camera in a previous episode, but they have one of the best replacements in Joe Alt, so I'm not overly worried about that. And then they got a couple weapons for Justin Herbert in the first couple picks of the draft in Omarion Hampton and Trey Harris. So I like the offense. I think it's going to be good. I'm a little bit concerned about the defensive line, and so that's going to be my X factor. You lose two starters in Joey Bosa and Poona Ford. And it's just, that's never something you want when you're such a stout defense. You don't want to lose guys. You would prefer to keep them around. They still have Khalil Mack, as he's still kicking, but I'm wondering who's going to step up on this defensive line because it's just going to look different than it did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. That defense was awesome, and it is going to be interesting to see kind of how they handled those departures. But the number one thing that can help a defense is a good run game and controlling the clock. And that's why for my X factor, I am going to be going over to that spot that was vacated by Joe Alt, because while I do believe he will be awesome in replacing Slater, rest in peace, Joe Alt, their replacement at right tackle is a guy, I believe right now it's Trey Pipkins, if I'm not mistaken. Someone who was their right tackle before they drafted Joe Alt and was an absolute liability. So I can't imagine Chargers fans are pumped seeing him as the projected starter right now. But to me, that's the X factors right there, because in an ideal dream world for Jim Harbaugh, he wants to run the ball 30 to 40 times a game, right? This is not a offense that's going to go out there and sling it around and put up 400 yards through the air. He wants to just run the ball. He wants to drive the ball down your throat, and he wants to control the clock. He wants to limit the amount of time his defense is even on the field to begin with. And so I think, it showed. He invested. He got Mekhi Becton, who people don't really realize because he was kind of deemed a draft bust. That is maybe the best run blocking guard in just terms of pure physicality, in a long time. I would say at least since I'm blanking on his name right now. It's the Hall of Fame guard for the Cowboys back in the day, bench press like 500 pounds. Mekhi Becton single-handedly ruined the Rams. Genuinely watching those games, he would take 2 to 3 guys out of the play every single time they handed the ball off to Saquon. And so this is a bigger signing than I think people are recognizing. Him playing, I don't know if he's playing right or left guard, but if it's him and Alt on the same side, holy crap, that is going to be an amazing, amazing side of an offensive line. So if they can just kind of solidify that right tackle spot, I think that really is going to be what makes them dominant again. They might not need to have quite the presence on offense, because I do believe they upgraded. I think Amarian Hampton's awesome. And then I think Najee Harris is really good. People kind of trolled him and made fun of him. No one looks good in Pittsburgh right now. No offensive player looks good there. So for him to come over here, we saw what Gus Edwards looked like in this offense. If Gus Edwards can look like an explosive back, Najee Harris is going to look incredible. And, Amarian Hampton should look amazing as well. So, Larry Allen. Thank you, Drew, for the little notes check here. So Larry Allen, that dude was amazing. If you've seen highlights, if you want to see highlights, go look up some Larry Allen plays. It's somehow, for a guard, some of the most entertaining highlights you'll see.
There you go. You have some homework. Grind that Larry Allen tape, and then report back your findings. Look, I agree. The running back position is going to be an important one for the Chargers, because it is what they want to do. But you think about, you've got guys on the offense last year, Ladd McConkey had a good year, breakout year for him, his first year in the league. What other wide receivers do they have going on over here? Does Quentin Johnson still play for the Chargers?
Quentin Johnson still plays. They've got Trey Harris. He got knocked out of the Rams preseason game. Ironically, he dropped a ball and then just got popped. They re-signed Keenan Allen. That was a notable addition. That was recent that we kind of missed. And then there's also there's another draft pick, crazy long name. It's like KLS is his initials or something like that.
Andre Lambert Smith from Auburn.
Yeah. So people have been really hyping him up. So they have, honestly, in my opinion, a very deep wide receiver room.
Yeah. And so what I was trying to say there was there is going to be a little bit of whenever you have the pool of talent, the sum of the talent, butt heads with the coach's philosophy, right? At some point, something's going to have to give there, where it's maybe these running backs are going to be what Jim Harbaugh needs them to be and everything will be fine. But if at some point the running backs aren't what they need to be, or one of them gets hurt and the other one, can't carry the load, all of a sudden it looks like you have more talent on this other side of the offense that you might need to lean into a little bit. And so I'm interested to see how that goes. For sure. The battle between the sort of philosophy of Jim Harbaugh versus the actual talent he has on the field will be interesting to watch. But bottom line for the Chargers is they might, like we've been hinting at, might need to be able to rely on their offense to outpace opposing teams because, their 2025 defense might look to be one that leaves a little bit to be desired compared to their last year's defense. They were, top 5 in EP per play on defense last year. So, considering also the lack of a true star in the running back room, just above average QB play isn't going to cut it anymore. So Justin Herbert has to be able to, if the running back room stays average, he's going to have to be able to really step in and step on up and be the Justin Herbert that everyone, has seen him be before. And so that'll be what the Chargers need to do. I'm inquiring as to the look on your face before we move forward.
Yeah, you're breaking your own rule.
Oh, that's not my X factor. I don't get.
Justin Herbert has to play well in order for the Chargers to work.
I don't give X factors. I'm not privy to that.
I don't know, Dallas. I think Jim Harbaugh's a pretty big piece of the picture too.
And don't play so short, Dallas.
You're right.
I find you to be very insightful.
Quarterbacks and coaches are fair game for the wrap up. All right, you gotta save something. So moving on to the next team that we want to talk about. We can spend a good amount of time here. We can spend as long as we want because here we are at Denver. So we're talking about the Broncos now. So the Broncos, they entered the 2024 season fresh off of one of the messiest QB organization breakups in recent memory. The hope for Broncos fans everywhere was that they'd be able to finally see if the Sean Payton era had any life in it still, after all of that life was sucked out of it by the Russell Wilson drama. And so, now that Sean Payton wasn't going to be preoccupied with keeping a highly paid former star happy, what was he going to be able to do? Did they have their belief rewarded? By leaps and bounds. Bo Nix led the offense back to competency, and the defense was truly elite. And that combo can work, and it can get you to the playoffs, and it got the Broncos to the playoffs. So there was electricity in the facility as the season ended, but were they able to use that electricity to jumpstart the offseason? And I think that is a great idea to switch up the responsibilities here and let Drew go off on the offseason recap for the Broncos.
Yeah, so it was a good offseason, I think, for the Broncos. So additions, tight end Evan Ingram coming over from the Jaguars, a couple 49ers defenders coming over, linebacker Drake Greenlaw, and safety, I always mess up his first name, but Hufanga is his last name. They also signed away a division rival running back, J.K. Dobbins. He had a good year for the Chargers last year. We're pairing him with second-round rookie R.J. Harvey. So that's the big additions. And then notable departures, linebacker Cody Barton, our backup quarterback, or I guess he was like third-string quarterback, Zach Wilson. He's more of a name than an actual player at this point. And our starting running back from the last few years, Javonte Williams. So honestly, not a huge loss mix in there, and a lot of pretty good additions. So I like that recipe for the Broncos.
Question for you. The defense obviously was, the best in the league by a lot of metrics last year. Do you think that Drake Greenlaw and Talanoa Funga are upgrades at their position for you guys, or are they sort of nice supplementary pieces? What do you see for them on the defense that was already, probably the best in the league?
I think they're definitely upgrades, provided they're healthy. I think that's been both of their kind of, issue in the past. But yeah, I mean, this is a defense that a lot of homegrown guys, and like Pat Surtain was a top 10 pick in the draft, and he's awesome, and he was defensive player of the year, and that's great. But like some guys that I think Jonathan Cooper was undrafted, and he had a great year last year. Nick Bonito was a second round pick. Zach Allen had a great year last year. He got a contract extension. Like these are just players. They're not necessarily household names yet, but like if they have another year like they did last year, I think they will be. And I think, adding some experienced guys who have been in the playoffs with the 49ers and play positions that we didn't have real strength at. I think they're both upgrades for sure.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, let's keep the good, the good Broncos talk going, and let's talk X factors. So since we had Drew do the recap, we'll bounce to Matt first for the X factors, and then we'll bounce back to Drew.
Yeah. So my X factor for the Broncos, I think the offense is going to be solid. I think they already weren't. It's not like they were bad, but they also weren't this like explosive elite offense. Like they were an offense that seemed like they were on an upward tick in learning the Sean Payton system. And I think they're just going to be a year improved on that. Like, I don't know if they're going to be this amazing offense still, but I think they're going to be good. But as far as the X factor goes, I think it's got to be the front seven of this defense. Because like you mentioned, Drew, you got awesome seasons out of guys like Jonathan Cooper, like guys like Zach Allen. There was a lot of players who performed seemingly above what they would have expectations set at. Jonathan Cooper, almost undrafted. He went 230 something or 240 something. He was a 7th round pick. Having guys like that continue to have their success, I think would be massive. Because we already know Pat Surtain is going to be, if not the best, one of the best corners in the league. You guys bring in guys like Hufanga, who, when healthy, is one of the best safeties in the league. Dre Greenlaw, when healthy, one of the best linebackers in the league. So, like, you have these pieces, but having the consistency from the guys you already had, I actually think is the biggest X factor, because it seemed like there was a lot of guys who played above expectation last year. So getting them to kind of stay put with those performances and those expectations would, in my opinion, mean a lot of positive things for the Broncos this year.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. In my head, I kind of am counting on them to have repeat seasons, but that's totally fair to, you got to see it again. It's interesting because the way I think about the Broncos roster right now is like, I don't see a glaring weakness. And that's not to say they're like the best roster in football or anything. I don't think that, but it's like everywhere you go around, you're like, yeah, that's pretty good. Like, that's a pretty solid player.
They're a very well-rounded roster.
Yeah. And so I think for me, the X factor is also on the defensive side of the ball. It's going to be whatever corner is playing opposite of Pat Surtain, because right now it's Riley Moss. He's a perfectly fine NFL cornerback, which is quite an accomplishment because he's a white guy. But
shout out white.
But he's
White
not like
revolution.
he's not like he's not the greatest player. And then we drafted in the first round Jahdae Barron from University of Texas, and I think he's going to play some nickel corner a little bit, but he's like not even starting on the depth chart right now, so I'm not really sure what the deal is with him. I'm not good at training camp that well, but anyway.
Let me tell you, Drew, he will be.
All right. That's good to know. But Riley Moss, he's solid, but he also missed some games last year, and it was pretty glaring when he did, because Pat Surtain is the best in the business still, in my opinion, and he can shut down one side of the field, but that leaves another side of the field, and that leaves other targets for quarterbacks. And we saw late in the year the Broncos were playing well above expectations for the year, and then they lost a few games at the end, and obviously still played well enough to make the playoffs, but they gave up a lot of points towards the end of the season, and it's concerning in a way because it's not a recipe for success. So I expect the defense to be good again, and I think that is going to be a big difference maker if Riley Moss can stay healthy, can stay on the field, and if Jahdae Barron can overtake guys on the depth chart and be in there. I think it'll be not a problem at all, but it's an if right now.
Yeah. Well, look, we kept discussion of this person out of X factors based on rules, but let's talk about Bo Nix a little bit. Year 2, big deal. kind of came into the league and people didn't really know all of what to make of him as an NFL quarterback, but he had a really good season last year, especially by rookie standards. And so, what do Broncos fans expect from Bo Nix in year 2?
I expect a lot from of what we saw last year, which he's not going to blow anyone away. He's not like the most talented quarterback in the world or anything. But he is just a solid quarterback who he's kind of like, like if you shrunk Josh Allen by 25%, and he can do like 25% of what Josh Allen can do, right? Like he's not as good at any one thing as Josh Allen, but he can do all the same stuff to some extent. And so, it was just, I had hardly any expectations for him going into year 1. And if it weren't for Jaden Daniels having an all-time season and Brock Bowers breaking like the tight end record or whatever, he could have been offensive rookie of the year, So I think he just year 2 is an important year for players. Like we've seen plenty of guys have really good rookie seasons and then not really do much again. And I don't expect that, but I don't want to see a step back in year 2. I want to see a step forward. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that. By all accounts, the offensive line should be really good this year. I like his weapons that he has, a lot of young receivers, and then also Cortland Sutton. I think it's a recipe for success for Bo Nix, but of course we got to see it.
No. Yep. Absolutely. Let's see. Elite defense, good O-line, second-year quarterback, well-coached. I've heard that before. I've actually seen that go to a Super Bowl and win before. So, let's see what the Broncos are capable of this year, under this new way. And last question about the Broncos, since we have a fan on, was it kind of a like last season and going into this season, if they perform, well again this year, maybe go to, if they go to playoffs again, is that like, how are you feeling about the Sean Payton era going into last year? And then if they make the playoffs again this year, how different would you be feeling now than you were 2 years ago?
Sean Payton, when we hired him, I wasn't thrilled. And it wasn't that I don't think he's a good coach. It just seemed like they kind of backed into him when they had other guys ahead of him on their preference list. And they had to give up a draft pick to get him because the Saints still had rights to his contract or whatever. But we were a team in free fall, in turmoil. Every move we made backfired. And I think we just needed an adult to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos. It's fun and trendy to have the young offensive mind. Sometimes it works very well, as Matt knows, but it doesn't always. And I think sometimes there is a time and a place where you just need the guy who's been there and done that. And I think Sean Payton is that guy. He's a no-nonsense type of guy. And I think that's a good kind of coach to have for a young quarterback, too. So I like it. What makes me uncomfortable right now is that I have expectations. In the last several times I've had expectations going into a Broncos season, they've let me down big time. So that I'm a little bit nervous. And, football can happen so quick. A couple guys get hurt, a couple bad losses, and all of a sudden your season is down the toilet. But I'm optimistic and I'm excited to see this team. Probably the most excited I've been since, it's kind of not fair that we had that Russell Wilson year where I got all excited, but that went south so fast. So, maybe since Peyton Manning, this is as optimistic as I've been. So that's cool.
Awesome. Well, yes, you can say, the Broncos made the most of the cap space they have. They focused on contract extensions with a lot of that money. They re-signed some key contributors from 2024, and they added pieces in key areas of need. The AFC West, as we've been talking about, is a division where even the most talented team could face an uphill climb to competitiveness. But the Broncos have the most important pieces in place. I listed them before: that dominant defense, upcoming quarterback looking to take a big step forward, and a head coach trying to cement his NFL legacy. All those things combined to form, one of the more exciting teams, not only in this division, but maybe in the league. So we'll definitely, follow them closely on this show for sure. Football fan corner coming your way soon once the season starts. So watch out for that. But let's talk about the last team in this division that we have yet to discuss, which is the Las Vegas Raiders. So, no secret that they were a mess coming into 2024. So much so that not even the addition of Tom Brady to their ownership group could save them from becoming one of the NFL's worst teams. They were good enough to deliver some exciting games here and there. But mostly this was a team that was wallowing at rock bottom. They're rudderless in the vast ocean of their own mediocrity. And the Raiders, in one of the toughest divisions in the sport, were in desperate need of a rebrand, roster upgrades on both sides of the ball, and a spark to ignite a fan base that would be considered to be probably apathetic at best. So let's see how they did and take a look at their offseason and see how they address some of those concerns.
Yeah, so I mean, most notably when it comes to the additions is just kind of the overhaul of the faces of the franchise. So you're going to see Pete Carroll, you're going to see Bubblegum, and you're going to see Geno. I feel like those are the big three. They also bring in new GM, John Spytek. Crazy name for a GM or anyone in sports. They also bring in Devin White, the linebacker, see if he's got anything left. Jamal Adams, which is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And then Philip Dorsett, Colts legend. As far as notable departures go, they got rid of Christian Wilkins. A story for another time, potentially. I know we've talked about it briefly. But then they also lost Divine Diablo and Nate Hobbs as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't get over it. It's Pete, man. He's back. I can't get over it.
I know we don't usually include draft picks as notable additions, but they did get Ashton Genty from in the first round of the draft, and that's
running back from Boise State for those unfamiliar.
And we expect him to be a star pretty quickly.
Huge. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and especially in a Pete Carroll, team, not that I would imagine that he has like as much influence as before, like he did in Seattle, but on a team like that, he will be popping off pretty early on. Also, I forget every second of every day that Chip Kelly is the offensive coordinator here now.
I literally was about to say.
I don't think I realized that until right now.
It makes me
Chip
crazy
Kelly
when I remember.
going to be the offensive coordinator, which I think is awesome. I think that's so fun.
Crazy.
Yeah, so it's Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly working together against Jim Harbaugh. It's Pac-12. RIP to the Pac-12, literally. That is dead for sure.
It's
literally.
the AFC West now.
And so, yeah, RIP to the Pac-12, but it lives on. The spirit lives on in the AFC West because it's everybody who mattered in that conference, all the coaches that mattered in that conference for like a decade, plus, coming back together again. So, yes.
Justin Herbert went to Oregon, so that's Pac-12.
Bo Nix went to Oregon.
Raiders now.
Bo Nix went to Oregon as well.
We need the Raiders to get an ex-Pac-12 quarterback, and I can't even think of anyone who might be available.
Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
It was available, by the way. It was available and could have had him. But did not. Seahawks sort of beat him out.
They should sign Marcus Mariota.
Yeah.
They should sign Marcus.
Oregon.
Yes, it's that'd be.
And then the Chiefs will replace Mahomes with Dylan Gabriel.
Hey, you heard it here first. You heard it here first. But yeah, I just wanted to
the Browns.
No. That's just no.
Fully guaranteed contract.
Neither party deserves that. Pat Mahomes in the bad way and Browns in the good way. The Browns don't deserve something that would be that good, and Mahomes doesn't deserve something that would be that bad. But yeah, so I thought I'd mention before we get into X Factors that Chip Kelly is going to be the offensive coordinator here, which I always forget, and it makes me feel crazy whenever I remember it because I'm like, how could I have forgotten that? That's the biggest thing ever. So yeah, it's awesome. But okay, so let's move on to X factors for the Raiders. So what do you guys think is going to be most key for the Raiders to show a little life this year?
Yeah. Look, the Raiders have an uphill climb. There's no buts about it, because this division is tough, and I'm using their division as a little sneaky X factor. Because if the Raiders were in, the AFC South, I think you could talk yourself into them being, a potential division winner. There is reasons. There's so much, turnover, but like, there are reasons to be in on this Raiders team. I mean, Geno Smith is a competent quarterback. That's something they did not have last year. Pete Carroll has had a lot of success in the NFL as a head coach. Ashton Genty, I'm sure many, many teams would like to have him as their starting running back. Maxx Crosby is a great defensive end. But at the end of the day, this roster is just not at the level of the other teams in this division. And beyond that, they have to play these teams twice each this season. And the Chargers had the least points allowed last year. The Broncos had the third least points allowed, and the Chiefs had the fourth least points allowed. And it's just not. It's an uphill climb. And so that's not to say the Raiders can't compete in this division. I expect to play a frustrating game against them like we do every year, regardless of their roster. But yeah, I think it's just, they're just not going to be able to climb the ladder all the way to the top. That's my prediction anyway. And so enjoy what you can this year, Raiders fans. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cool stuff going on, a lot of highlights. Brock Bowers is probably the best tight end in football right now. Ashton Genty, I'm really excited to see him. I was really sad that the Raiders got him because I want to root for him. So there'll be a lot of excitement on this team. It's just I don't know if they're good enough to really fight for a playoff spot in this division.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And, I've talked about this a few times over these recaps of like the NFL is famous for having every year a last to first kind of team. And I was thinking about the Raiders when I was looking at the X factors, and it's like, man, Geno and Pete are going to raise the floor of this team so much. Like, what was a team that had bottom one team potential, Pete won't have that. Geno won't allow that. They are better than that, right? And at the same time, I just think the talent of this division is too high for there to be a chance of a last to first turnaround, right? Like, the worst to first thing can't happen because the teams here are too good. So my X factor is going to be this defense, only because this may be the most offensively diverse division I've ever seen. You have Sean Payton and Andy Reid, two of the more creative offensive play callers of our time. And then you mix that with John Harbaugh, who brings in, Jim, and he brings in this intense running, 12 and 13 personnel type of stuff. You got to have a very flexible defense to compete in this division. So flatly, I think that's going to be it, because at this point, over the last few years, they've kind of let a lot of their defensive players go, except Maxx Crosby. Even guys who were good and showed flashes, they've let them walk or they've traded them. So I just don't know what the expectation on defense is here, but I think it has to be the X factors. They need playmakers on that side of the ball, because this offense should be at least competitive and fun to watch.
Yeah. You bring up a good point of this, the defenses in this division, the Raiders for sure, but all of them, they got to be good at a lot of stuff. And so because of the differences that they're going to face in their own division, for sure. But yeah, so, if like the timing of like Pete coming in and like the length of his current contract, it makes me like feel weird. Like, do they really think that by Pete's third year, there's like a fourth year team option or whatever. Do they really think that they're going to be competing for like a title by that point? Like, I don't know if I see that for them. But it could be that they don't think that and they just want him around for a little while. But the first year of a Pete Carroll, experiment, a Pete Carroll thing, is typically marked by, it's the get in there type of year, where you're just like, you're kind of finding your way. Pete's, and Pete, this is Pete and now the GM who's more in charge of personnel than Pete is. Kind of similar to what I was talking about with Kellen Moore last week, but not to a severe degree. It's like the players on this Raiders team are kind of auditioning to be on the team that will be in 2 or 3 years, that the ownership and GM and front office and everybody see as will be the competitive team. And so this year, it's figuring out who's going to be part of that team. And we'll see if anybody from, this roster besides, the staples, will be passing that test. I'll say I'm interested to see what Geno can do with Jacoby Myers. I think he is kind of underrated a little bit as far as, receivers go. I had him on my fantasy team last year, and he was just like a catch machine. And so he's proven that he can handle a lot of targets and he can make his catches. It's just going to be about, getting him fitted into something that gives him a little more opportunity to be explosive, perhaps, and convert those scores. But that's what I might see for this team this year, is kind of just experimenting around, trying people out, seeing what you got.
I mean, it's what the Broncos went through a couple of years ago when Sean Payton came in, right? You tried the flashy thing and it didn't work, and so now let's bring in the steady thing, the veteran head coach, the guy who's been around the block. He understands what it takes to win, even if he doesn't have the most original thinking. And we've already seen stuff happen. I mean, Christian Wilkins being cut, we don't know exactly what went into that, but I think we can surmise that there's a bit of Carroll thinking that's not the type of guy I want on my team, And it happened with the Broncos. Like Randy Gregory was on a big contract and got cut after like 4 games or whatever it was in the Sean Payton era. So, I mean, it's going to be, I think if you're a Raiders fan, like you can be excited for the future while recognizing this year is going to maybe have some growing pains. And then, we'll see, football, things can change so quickly year to year. All it takes is a little bit of, a team getting into cap trouble or some inopportune injuries, things like that. The Raiders should compete in the near future unless they just are cursed and the Raider way is the Raider way and they just can't do things right. But yeah, it's a transition year for them.
Yeah, 100%. Well, while we all agree, I think that they may be still a mile off of competing, especially in this division. They might as well be on top of the football world by the way that the fans are reacting to their offseason. And you know what? If it's good enough to convince Maxx Crosby to stay and sign an extension, he was requesting a trade not that long ago, or at least was rumored to have done that. And then Pete Carroll came on, the new GM came on, they made some moves, and it convinced him to stay. And so if it's good enough to convince him to stay, who wouldn't buy in at least a little, right? So for the first time in a while, it does feel like grown-ups are back in charge of the Raiders. And, this experiment, whatever they have going on, it'll no doubt be very interesting to watch, and so what becomes of, Ashton Genty, how big a star he becomes is going to be a factor here. Geno, can he go and, he's with Pete, who, believed in him at a time when not a lot of people did. And, now he's back with Pete. Hopefully that'll, be a good thing for him. So those kind of things are going to be, the interesting parts of this experiment for the Raiders. And so they'll be interesting to watch, if for nothing else than those things. So Now let's move on to division standings predictions. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to run down what you guys think will be the finishing order for this division this year, and we will start with Drew.
Yeah, I think until the Chiefs don't win the division, I'm going to predict them to win the division. So I've got the Chiefs finishing in first some way, somehow. They keep doing it. I expect them to do it again. And I have my Broncos finishing second. I considered third because, this is going to be a competitive division. But I feel good about this Broncos roster. I like the direction they're heading. And Bo Nix strikes me as the type of guy who, doesn't really fold under pressure. He's got a, kind of a mature head on his shoulders relative to his age. So he doesn't strike me as the type who's going to panic and, press and have a bad second year. And then I've got the Chargers finishing third. I still think it's highly likely they are right in the playoff hunt. Last year, the Broncos and Chargers had the same record, I think, until the last week or something, or it was something, they were really close to each other. So I could see something like that definitely happening again. And then, of course, that means the Raiders are in last place, but I don't think they will be as bad as they were last year, despite having to play the division 6 times. They do have that 4th place schedule for them, so I expect more than 4 wins this year, maybe around 7 or 8.
All right, Matt, what do you have this division finishing as here? Run us down your list here.
Yeah. I am going to predict the Chiefs to not finish first. I guess because why not? I have the Chargers finishing first of this division. Jim Harbaugh's a winner, dude. Love him or hate him, everywhere he's ever been, he has produced high-quality winning teams. And he showed that. I mean, he turned a franchise around that had been kind of a joke and a mess for years and immediately turned them into a playoff team. And they've had a lot of injury problems this offseason, but when have the Chargers not? And I really do feel like he's the type of guy that can lead them to a lot of winning football. And I'll preface this by saying my top 3, I don't see being more than 2 games apart from each other this year. All 3 of them. So it really is going to be a tight race, in my opinion. But second, I have the Chiefs. Just because, like you said, Drew, you can never really count out Mahomes, Andy Reid. I still think that they're going to be a really good team. I just think there's a chance, they could end up with the same record and maybe the Chargers have the tiebreaker, that kind of a vibe. Third, I have the Broncos. Once again, I see them as winning, 11 plus wins this year, 11, 12 plus wins. Playoff team. This is more just an arbitrary 1, 2, 3 than anything else. I think they'll be good. And then I have the Raiders last. Someone has to be at the end of the day. Someone has to be last in this division. I don't think the Raiders are in the same tier as those other 3. I think they could be a good team in other divisions, like you had mentioned. But they're going to be my 4th place team this year. Should be a middle of the pack team.
Yep. All right. Well, there you have it. Those are our thoughts on the AFC West for 2025. It was a great episode. We love to be able to dive deep on teams we're fans of. So this was a nice one for that. And also just this division has 4, potential Hall of Fame head coaches in it. It's going to be fun to watch them go at it for, all their matchups this year. And who knows, we might even get a playoff matchup between 2 of them at some point this upcoming season as well. So, that'd be really fun too. Thanks for watching. If you tuned in, we appreciate it as always. Make sure you like and subscribe to us here on YouTube. Drop your thoughts on the AFC West below in the comments. Let us know what you think the finishing order for this division will be. Next week, we finish our division previews for 2025 with the last division, which is the NFC West, again represented here on this show. And so we are getting to have a good, fun discussion on the NFC West next week. But until then, we'll take care and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.